Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ask Jenny Kae. The topic today is Do You Rip? And we'll get to that in just a minute. Apparently, there's a lot of passionate feelings about this. So we're going to wade into those murky waters. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember, this is your chance to get answers to your quilting questions. Please chime in throughout with your questions and your opinions and what you think about what I'm saying. I'd love to hear from you. All right, so just a little bit to let you know what is going on with me. My next class, upcoming class, will be at Rocky Mountain Sew and Vacuum in Littleton, and it is called the Flowers in the Window Color Workshop. And what I'm doing in that workshop is three classes, and there's homework in between each one, but it is an intensive look at color. We're going to talk about lots of different ways to choose color and use color in your quilt, and mostly about selecting color. So if you love color, you're going to love this class. If you are afraid of color and intimidated and just only want to go by the kit, this is also a great class for you. We'll talk about a lot of different stuff. It's a fun class, so be sure to check it out. Visit my website if you want more information. And while you're there, you can subscribe to my email. I'm giving out a free quilt pattern to new subscribers, so be sure to check it out. Also, last week, I was at my Quilt Guild meeting, Arapahoe County Quilt Guild, and we got to visit from Anna Lee Belden, who wrote this book, Thoroughly Modern Dresden, and she is hilarious. I got the funniest video and a great interview. They're both on my YouTube page, so you want to tune in and see those. Very, very funny. All right, so our topic to know. Oh no, these things right here behind me. Oops, I almost forgot. Okay, so this beautiful quilt behind me, the center of it is the ribbon floral block of the month that I showed you guys a while ago, but it is all starting to come online now. You can follow a link through my website for the block of the month, and the videos are starting to show up on qnntv.com. So be sure to check that out. And then I just wanted to give you guys a little preview. Look at this. These are the colors for the next block of the month that I'm doing for Fawns and Porter. It's going to be very exciting. I love all the polka dots. I've never worked with so many polka dots. It's going to be exciting. All right, so let's dive into our heated discussion about ripping. So, do you rip your fabric or do you cut it? When you buy it at the fabric store, do they rip or do they cut? And what do you think about that? I'm going to tell you where I'm coming from. I'm a ripper. I'm a fabric ripper. And before you roll your eyes and turn away, I want to explain how I came to be that and the reasons why I stay that way. So there's a few comments that people seem to have if they are opposed to ripping. One, they think it distorts the fabric. They think it causes waste. They can never get the fabric right or straight again, or they feel like they've been cheated, like they didn't quite get all their fabric. And I've heard all those, believe me, working in a shop and online and everything. I've heard all of those ideas. And I just want to address them a little bit. And I think a lot of it goes back to not really understanding exactly what happens when you rip and how you deal with your fabric after you rip it. You treat it a little bit differently than cut fabric, but it's very simple, and we'll talk about that, and I'll take you all the way through the process. Why I rip, I will tell you. In high school, I worked at Sofro Fabrics, and we cut everything. Think Sofro's, it's not around anymore, but think like it was a Joann's, but maybe a little smaller stores than Joann's. Anyways, the one I worked at was. But we cut everything. Everything was cut all the time. So I know how to do that. I did work there for probably 2 or 3 years. So, we did all the cutting with that. Then several years ago, I was working at a local quilt shop, and I worked there for about 3 years. And we ripped everything. Well, not the plush fabrics, but we ripped all of the cotton fabrics. And I learned a lot about the reasons for ripping and why you can get better results with ripping. So that's where I'm coming from. That's my perspective. I worked with both. I've had experience with both. So I just want to share that with you. Ripping is all about the bias. All about the bias. When I rip that fabric, I control where the bias is. I determine, right? So we have our straight of grain, which isn't very stretchy, our salvage, which has no stretch, and our bias, which can stretch all over the place. If I control the bias, I can control and get better results. If it's cut from the stores, then the manufacturing packaging controls where the bias is. Now there are no careful folding bias fairies that are at the manufacturing places and say, no, fold this just like that to get it there. That's the bias. Good. Go ahead and wrap it up. No, it is a violent, aggressive process, and they're not really concerned at that point exactly where your bias lines up. So the fold that you get, right? The fold that you get across the top there in the very center, that's purely due to manufacturing. There's no way, this is not the straight of grain. There is no guarantee this is the straight of grain. In fact, often it's skewed just slightly. Now, if what you're working on is going to be really dependent on that, a lot of triangles or like the ribbon block of the month that I showed you, you got to control that bias. That is serious business. If you don't do it in that one, you are in deep trouble. All right, so what happens when you rip? When you rip the fabric, and I'll show you here in just a minute, I take a little snip and I rip it and I pull it apart. When fabric rips like that, it only rips on the grain line. And I can say that very confidently. With the 3 years that I was working at the quilt shop, I only had 3 different fabrics that did not rip along the straight of grain. And they were found to have defects, all 3 of those fabrics. So, it will rip, and I mean, I did it a lot. I ripped a lot of fabric, and it will rip along the straight of grain, and that identifies your grain line. Okay, so let me show you how I rip. All right, I'll just show you. I have a piece of fabric here, and this is a good example of what you typically get. This is high-end quilting cotton, okay, and this side I have ripped and trimmed. This side, I have not. This is exactly what came to me from the manufacturer. This fold that's here on the top is from the manufacturer. This way that it lines up at the end here and doesn't meet at the salvages, that's from the manufacturer, all right? It's skewed like that. And I know you have fabrics like that, right? You cut it and it's just wonky the whole time. Well, if you try to straighten it up by using the fold, or using some other kind of standard like that besides the straight of grain, you're always going to be off grain the rest of the time you use that fabric, the whole time. And it does make a difference. I have seen it with my students. I have seen it in my own projects. I have seen it in things that I've had to do and things that I've put on camera. If you're not in control of that bias, you can run into problems. It does make a difference. All right, so here's how I rip, and I'm just going to start at this edge. I'm going to take a snip here. Oh, it looks like we have some comments here. Hang on. Let me tell you. Oh boy, we're very excited. Hi Jenny, I didn't know that ripping would give me the straight of grain. Thank you. There's a reason to rip. Oh, thank you, Janet, for chiming in. I appreciate that. Yes, there's a reason. I don't like old wives' tales, and I don't like doing something just because somebody says, well, that's the way it's supposed to be done. I like to find out why. Okay, so here I have my piece like this, and you rip it just like this. Now, if you're concerned about wasting this bit of fabric, you can just save it for something else. A little applique, something, whatever you want to. So I rip it like that. Now, you're going to say, I've heard people say, oh, it distorts, the fabric is distorted now. It's not any good anymore or something. But here's what I do, because sometimes it can be a little bit more skewed and other times not. Oh, I have another comment here. It's Jean. Hey, Jean. Go, Jenny. Go, Jenny. Rip, rip, rip. Jean's one of my students, so she knows. I taught her. All right. So here it is, and you can see that the edge, it's a little bit, seems like it's roughly, all right? Well, let me back up a second. I want to show you this clue. If I can pull these fibers off like this, then I have the straight of grain. And I've seen students bring fabric into class and they'll rip it and cut it. They'll rip it, getting ready to go, and it is so far off grain. It's just skewed dramatically. That would have affected everything that they cut. Okay, let me go back here. So here I have this. All I would do to fix this. You just press this out and then I trim. I just trim that little part of fuzzy off. So maybe I've used an inch or maybe lost an inch and a half. You know, when I go to a shop and they don't cut, I will ask for a couple more inches, maybe an eighth of a yard. I mean, come on, I'm buying a lot of fabric anyway, so I'm going to have some extra. But I'll ask for that little bit so that I can rip it and make sure I have a straight of grain that's going to work for me. So yeah, just trim that up and you're going to be good to go. When don't I rip? I have two things I really distinctly would not rip for. Panels. If you have a panel, you don't know if that panel's been printed on straight of grain, don't do it. Just cut it out and work with it the best you can. Don't rip it there. The other time where I would not rip it is if I got something, say I got something for a quilt, like something back here, and I only had a certain limited space for it, and I thought, oh my goodness, it's not enough. I'm not going to rip it. I'm just going to take my chances or use a lot of starch or work with it that way. And let's see, we got Cynthia said, do you cut it on the fold? Oh, good question, Cynthia. Yes. Okay, so, and I'll address that here. So what I do then, I lay this down, and this is my straight edge. I have the fold towards me, and I cut along this edge. I lay the ruler down and cut right there. I ignore kind of where the fold is. I make sure this is lined up on my mat, a nice straight line, and I ignore whatever salvage business is happening here at the bottom. I don't care. And I ignore if the fold, say, it goes up at an angle, just as long as this is straight. I always cut with the fold towards me because, you know, you get kind of the wavy. You can get like a smile on a strip instead of just a straight strip. If the fold is towards me, I'm going to be less likely to do that. And if it is a little curve, it's going to be up at the top by the salvage, which I prefer. So here's what I would suggest. Give it a try. You know, when you go, get a couple more inches if they cut the fabric, okay? And try ripping, especially where the bias is going to be critical, like the ribbon block of the month quilt that I showed you. Bias is absolutely critical there. That's the reason that I rip. I'd love to address your questions if you have any other ones about it, but I think it's a good thing, and you give it a try. If it works for you in the way you quilt, then that's good enough for me. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'll check and see if we have any other questions, but I think we're good. All right, so if you do have questions, post them in the comment sections below. I will get to them as soon as I can. Please feel free to share this video, subscribe on my YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.